Hello and welcome to the Bradford Literature Festival. My name is Jeffrey Boakye and I'm a teacher, a father and an author. And my latest book is called Musical Truth, A Musical History of Modern Black Britain in 28 Songs. One of the questions I've been asked to talk about is how I got into writing, and I suppose it's not something you get into, it's something that you do your whole life when you're trying to make sense of the world. But it wasn't until maybe 2016 or so that I decided to work on a project big enough to be published. And that was my first book, which went on to my second book and so on. And now we're looking at Musical Truth. So Musical Truth, as you can work out from the subtitle, is a history of modern Black Britain, but told via a playlist of songs. Now, that was quite a challenge, and I should probably explain why I decided to tell a history through music. The first reason is that music is, I think, an incredible way of exploring marginalized stories and narratives and cultures. Music's something which we can all understand, but it's something which is often not taken very seriously, particularly pop music. But by tracking the history of certain genres and styles and artists, I realized I could tell quite a profound story about what it means to be Black and British in the 21st century and what's led us up to this point in the decades previous. So the big challenge was which songs to pick, and I landed on 28 in total. There's no mystical reason for that. It's just the number of songs that I ended up writing. And each song is part of the puzzle of what it means to be Black and British and how Black British culture has contributed to British culture in general. So there's lots of songs that I could talk about, and there's a lot to read about in there, but I'm going to look a little bit at 3 songs in particular, just to give a sense of what this journey has been like for me as the writer, and also what it's been like for the Black community in this country. So I want to go all the way back to my year of birth, which is 1982, which I don't know, it might sound like a long time ago for some of you, but to me, it doesn't feel very long ago at all. And in 1982, a song was released, which was actually the fastest selling single of that year. It's called Pass the Dutchie by a group called Musical Youth. And you might have realized that I took that title for that group and played around with it for the title of my own book. Now, Musical Youth were young, hence youth, and they made reggae music, hence musical. And they were from a city called Birmingham. What's interesting though is that they made reggae music at a time when it wasn't so popular in the UK, despite the fact that Jamaican people from the West Indies had been living in this country in communities, in mainly cities for quite some time. And they were really, really young. When I say they were kids, I'm saying they were between 11 and 15. So it was unusual for a group like that to be making music. And I suppose why I'm telling you this now is that it's really important to recognize that culture can be steered by young people. Adults, by the time you get to my age, you're kind of cooked. You know, whatever you think has happened, whoever you think you are, it's almost like cement. But young people come with a freshness, with a vibrancy, with new ideas, and with an optimism, which can then take things in a new direction. So Pass the Dutchie being a reggae song that kind of took the world by storm in 1982 is a really important moment for Black British culture and also the West Indian heritage that has influenced British culture quite a lot since after the Second World War. In 1982, I was just alive, so I didn't buy a copy, but 100,000 people bought it, I think in its first week, which is a huge number of people. You consider the fact that you had to, get up, put your coat on, go to a record shop, buy a record, and actually bring it back home to listen to it. And it went on to become a huge, huge hit. And that's a song which, as I grew up, I heard it a lot. It was a song that my dad would play, my extended family, my sisters, and it was one of those songs that we all knew and loved and shared throughout my development. So if we skip forward a little bit and go on to the second song that I want to talk about, it's only a few years later, it's 1990. So by this point, I'm about 8 years old and I'm the youngest in my family. And what that means is I've got 2 older sisters who I'm just looking at the whole time and working out, well, how do you be a teenager? And they had their own record collections. This is way before the internet. So if you wanted to listen to music, you had to basically wait for the radio to play the song you liked, or you could watch it on TV. There was a program called Top of the Pops, which was on every Thursday. And that's when you found out who was number 1, which was very important at the time. I don't think anyone cares now. Or you'd have to buy your own music. And one of the records that my sisters owned was a song called It's a Shame by Monie Love. Now, Monie Love is a rapper. She's a woman, which is important because there weren't many female rappers, and actually there still aren't that many. And she's also British, which is hugely significant because in the late 80s and the early 90s, most hip hop was coming from America. So Monie Love creating this record that was unapologetically hip hop and really, really good at being hip hop was a massive moment. And I could see how it impacted on my sisters as two young black women. And listening to Monie Love, it kind of showed me that British people, black British people, young black British people could lead the way in these exciting new cultural moments. And it's just a great song. It's one which takes a sample from a much older song, like a lot of the music that I listen to. Hip hop is sample heavy, and it turns it into something very new and exciting with lots of fast talking, which fascinated me as a child. I include that in this little roundup of songs because I feel like, again, that's an example of how young people can absolutely lead the way and show the way forward and can steer culture in a way that maybe adults struggle to. And it can be done so fluently and naturally and with a lot of joy. Now, there's a lot of that in Musical Truth, a lot of celebration. The first two tracks that I've talked about so far are celebrations of different genres of music, be it reggae or hip hop, the celebrations of what it means to be black and British, and the celebrations of youth. But obviously, it's not just a story of joy. The black experience in this country includes a lot of trauma, a lot of pain, and many problems that the black community has had to resist or protest. And that's something which, when you read Musical Truth, you're going to see that returning quite a lot. What has it meant to struggle through a country that struggles with institutional racism, that struggles with prejudice against immigrant communities, and that continues to struggle with discrimination against people who aren't white or who aren't racialized as white? And that takes me all the way up to 2019. So 2019, I was actually in the process of writing Musical Truth. But by that point, I was a fully grown adult, with a job. I'm a teacher, kids of my own. And looking at the world, you sort of wonder, have things moved on? Have things changed? A lot of the things I talk about in Musical Truth, I wasn't taught in school. So I had to learn a lot about Black British history outside of school. And I've put a lot of that into this book. And in 2019, a song was released by a young, I suppose you'd have to call him a grime artist, but he's a UK rapper by the name of Dave. And Dave wrote a song called Black. And it happened to coincide with lots of political tensions surrounding the Prime Minister. And in the song Black, Dave talks about not just what it means for him personally to be black, but what the struggles have been for black people in Britain going back decades, even before he was born. Now, the reason I talk about this song now, and it's the third of three songs, is because it's just a beautiful essay that discusses and explores all the things that I try to explore in my work. It looks at black history globally. It looks at what happened with the transatlantic slave trade and how countries in Africa were carved up and categorized according to what was most valuable and what that did to those communities who then found themselves scattered all over the globe, but without the empowerment that had been denied them by being turned into enslaved peoples. It looks at what it means to grow up in a society that struggles with racism and how the intersection of poverty and racial discrimination can make it really difficult to be an empowered person. But it also celebrates blackness. It talks about all the great things about the black community and where strength in unity comes from. And it does all of that while quietly asking you questions about, well, where do we go from here? And I think that's the final big point, that I'm optimistic that the future can change. A lot of the problems that we've seen thrown into the spotlight over the past year or so, the uplift in the Black Lives Matter international movement, the conversations that we're starting to have surrounding race and racial inequality, we're reaching a point where the conversations are starting to take us somewhere, but we're not there yet. And in a song like Black by Dave, you can see that successive generations are ready to take on those challenges. And that's part of the reason why I'm a teacher as well, because I want to speak to successive generations. And I genuinely believe that younger people kind of have the key to changing things, because older people are too reliant on things staying the way that they are and the way they always have been. So we've been from 1982, Pastor Dutchie, all the way through to 1990, Monie Love, It's a Shame. And then we skipped forward a generation to 2019, Black by Dave. And I'm hoping that you've got a few questions in your own head about what this means to you personally and what kind of world we're living in. The mission now, I suppose, is for you to do some of what I've done, all right? I wrote a history book about music because I love music. And I feel like we can learn from music. We can learn stories. We can learn about people's experiences. We can learn about the traumas as well as the joys of what it means to be human. And I would love for you to think about a song that means something to you, that speaks to you in any way. And then do what I've done. Maybe not write a book about it, but definitely think about what it's teaching you. There is a way we can do that if you need a method, which involves my left hand. Here it is. The thumb. The thumb is the international symbol for the best thing. So what's the best thing about that song? What's the thing that you want to shout out to the world about why that song is brilliant? The pointing finger, the index finger, is a bit different. What's the point of that song? So the best thing about Pastor Dutchie for me is probably the reggae groove, which just takes you to a far sunnier place than Birmingham. But the point of the song might be to show us that reggae is really important as part of British culture, different to the best thing. This is the biggest finger on your hand, and this is the biggest thing about the song. What's the thing which is going to stand the test of time? For a song like Black, it might be the fact that it was a political moment that might have sparked some small political change. That might be the biggest thing, but only time will tell. You may or may not be married. I've got a ring on my finger, so this is a bit of a cheat here. But if you could ring up the artists, if you could phone a friend, what questions would you have? And I've got loads of questions for all the artists that I've mentioned in Musical Truth. For Monie Love, I would love to ask, what was it like to be a young female British hip hop star at a time when hip hop had only really been around for about 10, maybe 15 years? I would love to hear that from her personally. And the final one, the pinky promise, it's often called a pinky. What do you promise to do going forward? I've made a pledge and a promise to explore Black culture and Black history through popular culture, through music, and to keep on celebrating. And I wonder what your promise would be to your younger siblings, or one day when you're older, when you're my age, what your promise will be for people that have been born after you. So that's something which I'd love for you to do. Think of a song, play around a bit, have a think, and maybe you could add to your own catalogue of Musical Truth tracks. Okay, to sign off, thank you so much for listening. My name is Jeffrey Boakye. I'm the author of Musical Truth, a musical history of modern Black Britain in 28 songs. And this is the Bradford Literature Festival. Hope you enjoyed it.